The entire vampire court would remember the exact second Princess Alara touched him, because before that moment, Nathan Vale was only the servant carrying the silver tray. He had repeated that truth to himself all morning while standing beneath the crystal chandeliers of Blackthorn Palace, where even the candle flames burned a quiet shade of crimson and every polished marble tile reflected faces that were too beautiful, too still, and too hungry to feel real. Nathan was 29, human, and paid just enough to keep his sister's medical bills from swallowing what little was left of his life back in Ohio. He was not a knight, not a noble guest, not one of the diplomats wrapped in velvet and gold who had arrived to witness the royal bloodline ceremony. He was the man who knew which goblets belonged to which ancient lord, which trays had to be carried with both hands, and which doors a human was never supposed to look through. In Blackthorn Palace, rules were not suggestions. Humans kept their eyes down. Humans spoke only when spoken to. Humans did not stand too close to the royal dais, and they absolutely did not draw the attention of Princess Alara Vare, only daughter of the vampire queen, heir to a dynasty older than the first American colony and colder than the moonlight pouring through the stained glass ceiling. Nathan had seen her only twice before, both times from a distance. Once in the East Corridor, where she walked between 12 armored guards without making a sound, her white gown trailing behind her like mist over a frozen lake. Once in the Winter Garden, where she stood alone beside a dead fountain, staring at roses that could not bloom without sunlight. He remembered that second time too clearly, not because of her crown, or her pale silver hair, or the crimson glow in her eyes, but because she had looked tired. Not weak, never weak, just tired in a way Nathan understood, the kind of tired that came from being needed by everyone and known by no one. That was why, 3 nights ago, when he found her outside the servant passage with one hand pressed against the stone wall and no guards in sight, he had made the mistake that would ruin his ordinary life. He had not bowed fast enough. He had not run. He had simply offered her the cup of warmed rosewater from his tray and said, "You look like you've been standing too long." For one breath, the princess had stared at him as if he had spoken a forbidden language. Then she took the cup, not with command, but with surprise, her fingers brushing the edge of his glove. "You do not know who I am," she had whispered. Nathan had lowered his eyes then, because he was not foolish. "I know enough to see when someone needs a minute." She had said nothing after that, but when he returned the next night, the empty cup was waiting beside the same corridor, with a single black rose laid across it. Now, in the grand hall, Nathan tried not to think about the rose hidden inside his jacket pocket as he moved through the crowd with a tray of ceremonial glasses. Around him, the most powerful vampire families in North America stood in perfect circles, speaking in low voices sharp enough to cut through the music. They had come to watch Princess Alara choose a political consort, someone worthy of merging bloodlines with House Vare. Every lord in the room expected the choice to be one of them. Every lady smiled like the future had already been negotiated. Nathan kept his head down, counting his steps. 15 feet to the side table. 10 feet to the servant arch. Do not slip. Do not listen. Do not look at the princess. Then the horns sounded, deep and slow, rolling through the hall like thunder trapped under ice. The crowd parted. Queen Marceline rose from her throne in a gown of black diamonds, and beside her, Princess Alara stepped onto the dais, surrounded by blue-white fire that made every window frost at the edges. She looked perfect, untouchable, royal. But when her eyes swept across the court, they did not stop on the princes, generals, or ancient heirs waiting for her hand. They stopped on Nathan. His fingers tightened around the tray. A glass trembled. Somewhere behind him, another servant whispered his name like a warning. Princess Alara took one step down from the dais, then another. The music faltered. The court turned. Nathan forgot the rule about looking up. Because she was walking straight toward him, her expression calm, but her eyes full of something almost desperate. Queen Marceline's voice cut through the silence. "Alara." The princess did not stop. Nathan's heart began to hammer, so loudly he was sure every vampire in the hall could hear it. He wanted to move, to bow, to vanish into the servant arch, but his boots felt locked to the marble. The tray dipped in his hands. Before the first glass could fall, Alara reached him. She caught the tray with one hand, set it aside without looking, and then, in front of the entire royal court, She wrapped both arms around a human servant and held on, as if he were the only warm thing left in the world. The palace froze. Not metaphorically. Frost raced across the marble in a bright silver web. Candles went still. Every noble face turned white with shock. Nathan stood with his hands half raised, afraid to touch her, afraid not to, while her voice reached his ear in a whisper only he could hear. You remembered I was a person. Then heat bloomed beneath his shirt, sudden and bright. A crimson mark burned to life over his chest, shaped like a crown inside a circle of thorns, and the entire court fell to its knees except the queen, who stared at Nathan as if a servant had just become a kingdom's greatest crisis. The silence after the mark appeared was worse than any scream Nathan had ever heard, because it was the kind of silence made by creatures who had forgotten how to be shocked. Princess Alara still held him, her forehead lowered near his shoulder, her grip steady but trembling just enough for him to know she was afraid too. Nathan could feel the heat of the crimson symbol through his shirt, not painful, not exactly, but alive, pulsing in time with a second rhythm beneath his own heartbeat. Around them, hundreds of vampire nobles remained on their knees, not because they wanted to honor him, but because the ancient bloodline mark had forced their bodies to recognize something their pride could not accept. A human servant had been claimed by the royal line in front of the entire court. The first to move was Queen Marceline. She descended from the throne with a grace so controlled it made every step feel like a verdict. Her black diamond gown whispered over the frost-covered marble, and the air grew colder as she approached. Nathan wanted to step back, but Alara's arms tightened for one brief second, warning him without words not to run. The queen stopped 6 feet away. Her crimson eyes did not look at his face at first. They looked at his chest, at the glow still burning beneath the fabric, at the impossible proof that could not be negotiated away. Show it, she said. Nathan swallowed. His hands felt numb. Your Majesty, I do not know what this is. A ripple moved through the court, outrage wrapped in disbelief. Somewhere to his left, Lord Vailric, a tall vampire with silver rings on every finger and a smile sharp enough to split glass, rose halfway from his forced kneel. He admits ignorance. The mark is false. A human trick. The mark pulsed brighter, and Vailric dropped back to one knee as if the palace itself had corrected him. Nathan flinched at the sound of the noble's breath catching, but there was no violence, only humiliation, and that humiliation spread across the room like spilled ink. Queen Marceline lifted one pale hand. No one speaks until I permit it. The court obeyed. Alara finally released Nathan, though she stayed close enough that her sleeve brushed his. Without the shield of her embrace, he felt every eye in the hall land on him. He had spent months in Blackthorn Palace training himself to be invisible, to move like furniture, to anticipate needs before being noticed. Now every noble, guard, diplomat, and servant was staring as if his skin had become a declaration of war. Nathan slowly opened the top buttons of his service jacket, then the collar of his white shirt, just enough to reveal the upper edge of the mark. Gasps traveled through the court. The symbol was not painted on him. It glowed beneath his skin, bright crimson lines forming a crown inside a ring of thorns, with tiny branching marks spreading outward like roots searching for soil. Queen Marceline's expression did not change, but something in her eyes darkened. That is the Heartline seal, she said. The words seemed to drain warmth from the room. Alara turned her head sharply. Mother, do not pretend you did not know what you risked. I knew what they wanted from me, Alara answered, and for the first time Nathan heard steel under her quiet voice. I knew every family in this room came to choose my future as if I were a treaty with a pulse. The nobles did not move, but their silence sharpened. Nathan looked at her, truly looked, and saw the perfect princess begin to crack at the edges. Not in weakness. In truth. Her hands were folded in front of her now, fingers pressed too tightly together. The same woman who could freeze a palace had been standing on that dais like a sacrifice dressed in white silk. Queen Marceline's gaze shifted to Nathan. What did you do to my daughter? Nathan felt the whole court lean into the question. It would have been easy to say nothing. Safer, probably. A human servant did not defend himself before vampire royalty. He certainly did not defend a princess from her own mother. But he remembered the corridor 3 nights ago, the cup of warmed rose water, the way Alara had looked when he offered it. as if kindness without an agenda was a door she had forgotten existed. He forced himself to stand straighter. I gave her a drink when she looked unwell. A few nobles laughed softly, cruelly, but Nathan kept his eyes on the queen. I did not know it meant anything. I did not ask for anything. She looked like someone who needed a minute, so I gave her one. Alera's breath caught beside him. Queen Marceline studied him as if he had answered in a language older than blood. A minute, she repeated. You touched the loneliness of a royal heir and thought it was ordinary courtesy. Nathan did not know how to respond to that. Lord Vailric rose again, this time slowly, fighting the pressure of the mark with pure arrogance. Your Majesty, this cannot stand. The Heartline seal binds political legitimacy, protection rights, and succession witness. If a human bears it, every enemy of House Vare will call the bloodline contaminated, and every ally will ask why the princess chose a servant over a prince, another noble whispered. That was when Nathan understood the disaster was not romantic. It was political. The mark on his chest had not only embarrassed the court, it had changed the map of power inside the palace. Queen Marceline turned toward her daughter. The ceremony is suspended. The court is sealed. No one leaves Blackthorn Palace until the mark is examined. Heavy doors boomed shut around the hall, one after another, locking in nobles, servants, guards, and secrets. Nathan's stomach sank. He had not been chosen into a fairy tale. He had been pulled into the center of a royal crisis. Then Alera reached down, took his unloved hand in hers, and the mark answered with a soft crimson glow that reflected in every frozen window. The queen saw it. The court saw it. And from somewhere beyond the sealed doors, a bell began to ring, low and urgent, the palace alarm reserved for threats to the royal bloodline. The alarm bell did not sound like metal. It sounded like a giant heart waking up beneath Blackthorn Palace, slow, deep, and ancient enough to make every chandelier tremble without moving. Nathan stood beside Princess Alera with her hand still wrapped around his, and for one impossible second, he thought the floor beneath them was breathing. The crimson mark on his chest answered each bell tone with a pulse of heat, and every pulse drew thin lines of light across the marble, spreading from his boots toward the royal dais like a map being redrawn in real time. Queen Marceline saw it first. Her eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in recognition, and that frightened Nathan more than if she had shouted. The nobles began to rise as the force of the mark loosened its grip, but no one dared move far. The sealed doors remained shut. The frost along the windows thickened. Somewhere beyond the hall, guards were running. Their boots struck the corridors in disciplined rhythm. Yet even that sound seemed careful, as if the palace itself had become too sacred to disturb. Lord Vailric adjusted the cuffs of his black coat and looked at Nathan with polished contempt. This proves nothing except contamination. The human should be removed from the hall before the seal spreads further. Alera stepped in front of Nathan before the last word finished. Echoing. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. No one removes him. The court went still again, but this time the shock felt different. Earlier, they had been stunned by the mark. Now they were stunned by her choice to defend it. Nathan wanted to tell her not to risk herself for him, but the words stayed trapped behind his teeth. He had served enough powerful people to know when a room had become a battlefield made of silence. Queen Marceline lifted her hand, and the palace guards entered through two side arches, their armor made of dark silver and ice-blue glass. They formed a ring around Nathan and Alera, not close enough to threaten, but close enough to remind everyone that mercy in this place had boundaries. The captain of the guard, a tall woman with braided white hair and eyes like red lanterns in fog, bowed to the queen. The Western Tower reports an old ward has awakened. The Heartline chamber has opened by itself. A murmur traveled through the court so fast it sounded like wind moving through dead leaves. Nathan felt Alera's hand tighten. Queen Marceline's face finally changed. Only slightly. Only enough to show that the impossible had become dangerous. That chamber has not opened in 200 years, she said. Not since the last true bond. Nathan looked from the queen to Alera. True bond. His voice was quiet, but in that silent hall it carried too far. Several nobles turned their heads as if hearing a servant ask a royal question offended the architecture. Alera ignored them. There are different marks, she said, still facing the queen. Most are political. Some are ceremonial. A few are protective. Her voice lowered, and Nathan heard the truth she had not wanted him to know. The Heartline seal is older than all of them. It appears only when the bloodline recognizes a witness, someone the heir trusts more than the court, more than law, more than fear. Nathan stared at her, the heat under his shirt suddenly feeling heavier than the whole palace. "Alara, I brought you a cup of rose water." "No," she said softly, and when she turned to him, the perfect mask of the princess was gone. "You saw me when no one was allowed to see me." Before he could answer, Lord Vailric laughed once, a clean and elegant sound without warmth. Touching. Unfortunately, ancient sentiment does not govern succession. If the chamber has opened, the law is clear. The mark must be tested before midnight. If he fails, the bond dissolves. Nathan did not like the way the court reacted to that word, fails. Not with hunger, not with excitement, but with relief. As if they had already found the doorway back to the world where he was only a servant and Alara was only a bargaining piece. Queen Marceline turned toward Vailric. "You are eager to quote laws that slept before your grandfather was born." "I am eager to protect House Vare," Vailric replied, bowing deeply. "And if the princess has been emotionally compromised by loneliness, then the court must protect her from the consequences." Alara went very still. Nathan felt the temperature drop around her, not wild, not uncontrolled, but wounded. That was the moment he understood the real prison she lived in. Every feeling she had was treated like a weakness. Every kindness toward her became a threat to policy. Every breath she took belonged to a family name carved in ice. The captain of the guard looked to the queen. "Your Majesty, the chamber will not remain open long." Queen Marceline studied Nathan as if weighing not his worth, but his capacity to survive being worth something. "Nathan Vale," she said, and hearing his full name from the queen made the hall feel smaller. "Until midnight, you will remain under royal protection. You will enter the Heartline chamber with Princess Alara. You will answer what the old ward asks. You will not lie. You will not attempt to flee." Nathan almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the absurdity of it had finally caught up to him. 10 minutes ago, his biggest fear had been spilling a tray in front of rich immortals. Now an ancient chamber wanted to judge his soul before midnight. He looked down at his hand in Alara's. Her fingers were cool, but her grip was honest. He thought of his sister in Ohio, of hospital rooms and overdue bills, of the ordinary life that had already been hard enough before royalty wrapped itself around his wrist. Then he thought of the empty cup in the corridor and the black rose hidden in his jacket. "I will go," he said. The court reacted, but Nathan did not look at them. He looked at Alara. For the first time since she had crossed the hall, something like hope moved across her face, small and dangerous. Queen Marceline gave one sharp nod. The guards parted. The side doors opened into a corridor lit by crimson torches, and at the far end, beyond layers of frost and shadow, a new light shone from a tower that should have been sealed. As Nathan walked beside the princess, the mark on his chest sent one final pulse through the palace, and every mirror in the grand hall turned black except one, where a hidden figure watched them from the other side and whispered, "The human must not reach the chamber alive." The corridor to the western tower did not feel like a passage inside a palace. It felt like a throat swallowing them into a place the modern court had tried to forget. Nathan walked between Princess Alara and the captain of the guard, with 6 armored sentinels behind them, and Queen Marceline several steps ahead, her black diamond gown brushing over the frost without leaving a mark. The red torches along the walls burned without smoke. Their light caught the old portraits hanging above the stone arches, generations of House Vare rulers watching with pale faces and crimson eyes, each one painted with the same expression, judgment without mercy. Nathan kept his hand pressed lightly over the mark beneath his shirt, not to hide it, but to steady himself against the strange rhythm moving through his chest. Every few steps, the Heartline seal pulsed, and somewhere deep in the tower, something answered. Alara walked close enough that her sleeve occasionally touched his wrist. She had not spoken since leaving the grand hall. That silence worried him more than any warning could have. In the court, she had been defiant. Here, beneath the eyes of her ancestors, she looked like someone approaching a door she had spent her whole life being told never to open. Nathan lowered his voice. "What happens in the chamber?" Alara looked ahead. "The ward asks for truth." "That sounds manageable." Her mouth curved, but it was not a smile. Not the kind people say out loud. The kind they build their lives around and hide from everyone, including themselves. Nathan felt the air leave his lungs. And if my truth is not good enough? This time she looked at him. The crimson in her eyes softened into something almost human. Then the court gets what it wants. The captain of the guard cleared her throat, a careful reminder that every word could become evidence. Alara faced forward again, but her hand brushed Nathan's for one brief second, not quite taking it, not quite letting go. They reached a spiral stair carved from black stone veined with red crystal. The steps climbed at least 80 feet inside the tower, circling a hollow center where silver mist drifted upward like breath from a sleeping giant. Halfway up, the palace trembled, not violently, but with a deep internal shift, as if a hidden lock had turned somewhere below the foundation. One of the sentinels stopped and touched the wall. "Your Majesty," he said. "The lower wards just sealed behind us." Queen Marceline did not turn. "Then we continue. If the court is cut off from the tower, we cannot receive reinforcements." "I did not ask for reinforcements." Nathan noticed the captain's jaw tighten. He also noticed the silence behind them had changed. The footsteps of 6 sentinels had become 5. He turned, slowly, and saw only 5 armored figures on the stair. The 6th stood one level below, motionless in the mist, helmet tilted toward the wall, as if listening to someone Nathan could not see. "Captain," Nathan said. The guard captain spun immediately. The frozen sentinel lifted a hand, not toward Alara, not toward the queen, but toward a small silver mechanism embedded in the wall beside him. Alara's eyes widened. "Do not let him touch that." No one had time to reach him. Nathan did the only thing that made sense to a servant who had spent months learning every maintenance flaw in Blackthorn Palace. He grabbed the brass service lantern from the wall, swung it low, and smashed it against the step at his feet. The flame went out, and thick white vapor burst from the lantern's cooling chamber, pouring down the stairwell in a sudden cloud. The sentinel's hand missed the mechanism by inches. The captain moved through the vapor and caught his wrist, pinning it safely away from the wall. No blades, no blood, just a fast, silent struggle of strength and control in the cold mist. The helmet fell back, revealing a guard Nathan recognized from the Grand Hall, his eyes glazed with black mirror light. Queen Marceline crossed the distance in one breath and placed 2 fingers against the guard's forehead. The black sheen cracked like ice under warm water, and the man collapsed to one knee, gasping as if waking from a nightmare. "Mirror influence," the queen said, her voice colder than the stone. "Someone in my court is using reflection magic." Nathan looked at the silver mechanism. What would that have done? Alara reached it first and went still. It would have sealed the chamber from the outside for 100 years. The words landed hard. The captain turned on Nathan, but this time there was respect in her stare. "How did you know to stop him?" Nathan wiped frost and vapor from his sleeve. "I did not know. I saw a hand reaching for an old wall switch during an emergency. In this palace, old wall switches are never good news." For half a second, no one spoke. Then Alara laughed once under her breath, small and bright, and gone almost instantly, but it changed the air around them. Queen Marceline looked at Nathan as if the pieces of him did not fit the place she had assigned him. "You risked interrupting a royal ascent because you guessed?" Nathan met her eyes, though every instinct told him not to. "I risked it because everyone else was watching for noble threats. Servants watch hands." The queen held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned and continued climbing. "Then keep watching." They reached the top of the stair at exactly 11:17. Nathan knew because a frozen clock above the final landing began moving again the moment the mark on his chest glowed. Ahead of them stood a pair of doors made from dark glass and white bone, though no seams or handles showed where they might open. Across the surface, old words, burned to life in a language Nathan did not understand. Alara translated quietly, and her voice lost color with every phrase. "Only the chosen witness may enter. Only the heir may follow. Crown, court, and mother must remain outside." Queen Marceline's expression hardened. "No," the doors answered before Alara could. A ring of crimson light expanded across the landing, gently but irresistibly pushing everyone back except Nathan and the princess. The captain tried to step forward and stopped as if meeting an invisible wall. Queen Marceline's eyes flashed. The palace did not care. Nathan looked at Alara, and for the first time, he saw fear openly on her face. Not fear of the chamber. Fear of being alone with the truth. The door opened without a sound. Inside was not a room but a night sky filled with floating mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of Nathan. Servant, brother, stranger, intruder, mistake. Alara stood beside him, royal and trembling. Nathan could have stepped back. No one would blame a human for refusing a law older than his country, older than his name, older than anything he understood. Instead, he took the black rose from inside his jacket, the one she had left for him, and placed it gently in her hand. I am not here because of the mark, he said. I am here because you should not have to face one more room alone. The Heartline chamber heard him. Every mirror turned toward them at once, and the first reflection whispered Nathan's name. The mirror that whispered Nathan's name did not show his face at first. It showed a small apartment in Ohio with a kitchen light that flickered every third second, a stack of unpaid envelopes on a counter, and his sister asleep beneath a faded blue blanket while a medical machine hummed beside her bed. Nathan felt the floor vanish beneath his certainty. The Heartline chamber was not reading his memories like a book. It was placing him inside the weight of them. Alara stood beside him, still holding the black rose, but her reflection had changed too. In the nearest mirror, she was not wearing a white gown or a royal circlet. She was a little girl standing at the edge of a throne room too large for her body, watching adults bow to her title while no one noticed her hands shaking. Nathan turned toward her, but the chamber pulled his attention back with a soft pulse of crimson light. A voice came from everywhere at once, quiet enough to feel personal and vast enough to make the stars beyond the mirrors tremble. Witness of the Heartline, state the truth beneath your kindness. Nathan's throat tightened. I do not understand. The mirrors shifted. Now he saw himself 3 nights earlier, offering Alara the cup of warmed rose water in the servant corridor. He saw the exact moment he looked at her and recognized exhaustion instead of royalty. Then the image rewound, splitting into darker reflections. Nathan taking the palace job because human servants were paid hazard bonuses. Nathan calculating how many weeks of work would cover his sister's treatments. Nathan hiding behind obedience because invisible people survived longer. The chamber spoke again. Was your kindness pure? Nathan felt heat rise in his face. It would have been easy to lie. It would have been easy to say yes, to become the kind of story the old magic wanted, a spotless human with a noble heart and no complicated reasons. But the mark on his chest pulsed once, warning or encouragement, he could not tell which. He looked at Alara. She was watching him, not with judgment, but with a fear more fragile than any he had seen on her before. If he lied, maybe the chamber would punish him. If he told the truth, maybe she would. Nathan closed his eyes. No, the mirrors went still. Outside the chamber, beyond the closed doors, he heard nothing, but he imagined the queen, the captain, and the guards waiting in silence while his life balanced on a word. He opened his eyes and faced the reflections. I was tired. I was scared of losing my job. I needed the money. I learned to be polite because polite workers are harder to fire. When I gave her that cup, I was not thinking about destiny. I was thinking that if someone collapsed in my hallway, I would have to explain why I walked past. The chamber darkened. Alara's fingers tightened around the rose until its black petals bent. Nathan forced himself to continue. But after she looked at me, it changed. Because she did not look like a princess then. She looked like someone who had gone too long without being asked if she was okay. I know that look. I have worn it. My sister has worn it. Half the people carrying trays in this palace wear it. So no, maybe my kindness was not pure. Maybe human kindness almost never is. Maybe it is made out of fear, debt, memory, and knowing exactly what it feels like when no one stops. The silence that followed felt alive. One mirror cracked, not from breaking, but from opening like a window. In it, Nathan saw the grand hall below. The court was no longer frozen in ceremonial shock. Nobles stood in clusters, whispering behind jeweled hands. Lord Vailric stood near a black mirror framed in silver vines, his reflection moving half a second before he did. Nathan understood with a cold rush that this was the hidden figure from the grand hall. Vailric had been watching through mirrors, pushing influence through reflections, trying to stop them before the chamber could speak. The image shifted again. Now Valeric was speaking to three noble houses, his expression grave and beautiful. If the human passes, the princess becomes untouchable. The queen will lose leverage. Our alliances will collapse. The servant must be declared an outside manipulation before midnight. Alara inhaled sharply. He is not trying to protect the bloodline. Nathan's eyes stayed on the mirror. He is trying to control your choice. The chamber's voice returned. Araver, state the truth beneath your embrace. Alara went pale. The black rose slipped from her hand but did not fall. It hovered between them, suspended in crimson light. Every mirror turned to her now. Nathan saw her memories flicker across them. Lessons in diplomacy before she was old enough to understand the word, etiquette tutors correcting the angle of her smile, noble families measuring her future as if she were land. Then he saw the winter garden, where she had stood alone by the dead fountain after another round of consort negotiations. He saw her hear Nathan's footsteps. He saw her expect fear, flattery, or calculation. Instead, he had offered a simple cup and a simple sentence, and something inside her had broken open, not because it was romantic, but because it was unowned. Alara's voice was barely above a whisper. I hugged him because I was selfish. Nathan looked at her. She did not look away. I knew the court would see. I knew the seal might awaken. I knew Mother would be furious. But when I saw him standing there with his head down like the world had trained him to disappear, I wanted one person in that hall to know he had not imagined matching. And I wanted one moment of my life that belonged to me. The chamber brightened until the floating mirrors became stars. The mark on Nathan's chest expanded, not burning through his shirt, but shining around the fabric in clean crimson lines. A matching light appeared at Alara's wrist, delicate as a bracelet made of dawn. The old voice spoke a final time, and this time even the stones seemed to bow. Imperfect kindness accepted. Uncoerced trust accepted. Witness and heir recognized. The doors behind them flew open. Crimson light poured down the stairwell, across the landing, and into the tower like sunrise in a world that had forgotten it. Queen Marceline stood beyond the threshold, unable to enter, but able to see. Her expression was unreadable until her gaze dropped to Alara's wrist and Nathan's chest. The captain of the guard sank to one knee. Then the sentinels followed. Nathan expected relief. Instead, the chamber showed one last mirror. In it, Lord Valeric smiled as the court gathered behind him, and every mirror in the grand hall began to darken at the edges. Then we moved to the final law, Valeric said. If the human is royal witness, he may be challenged before the full court. Alara stepped beside Nathan, the new light circling her wrist. Mother, she said quietly, tell me that law is dead. Queen Marceline's silence answered first. Then, from below, the palace bells began ringing again, not in alarm this time, but in summons. The entire court was being called to judge Nathan before midnight. The summons bells pulled every secret in Blackthorn Palace back toward the grand hall, and Nathan felt each note in the mark on his chest like a hand knocking from inside his ribs. He walked down from the western tower with Princess Alara at his side, Queen Marceline behind them, and the captain of the guard close enough to intercept anyone who came too near. No one spoke for the first 30 steps. The air carried the sharp scent of frost, old stone, and extinguished candle smoke. Somewhere below, hundreds of voices gathered into one restless murmur, the sound of a court preparing to turn judgment into theater. Nathan had never liked crowds, but this was different. A crowd in Columbus might stare because you spilled coffee or wore the wrong shirt. This crowd could turn a single sentence into law. Alara kept her wrist lowered, but the new crimson bracelet of light could not be hidden. It circled her skin with quiet certainty, matching the glow beneath Nathan's shirt. Every servant they passed saw it. Every guard saw it. Some looked afraid. Some looked hopeful. One young maid near the stairwell pressed her hand over her mouth and bowed, as if she had just seen a miracle she was not supposed to believe in. Nathan noticed because servants noticed each other. The nobles would see a crisis. The servants were seeing proof that the old bloodline could choose someone from below the golden rail. That realization made him more nervous than the court did. If he failed, it would not only be his humiliation. It would teach every invisible person in the palace to lower their eyes again. At the lower corridor, Queen Marceline stopped before a wall of black glass. Her reflection appeared behind her, tall, still, and regal, but the mirror's edges were stained with a creeping darkness that moved like ink in water. The queen touched the glass with 2 fingers. The darkness recoiled from her, then returned, slower and bolder. Valeric has spread his influence through the public mirrors, she said. The captain's hand tightened at her side. Then we should remove him from the hall before the court convenes. We cannot, Marceline replied. Not without making him a martyr before 3 ancient houses and half the council. Nathan looked toward the distant doors, hearing the murmur swell. So he gets to accuse me. In front of everyone. The queen turned to him, and for the first time, her face held something more complicated than command. He gets to challenge what you represent. That is far more dangerous. Alara stepped forward. Then deny the challenge. The queen's eyes softened for 1 second. So brief Nathan almost missed it. If I deny an ancient law tonight, every house that fears your independence will claim I broke tradition to protect my daughter's mistake. Valeric knows this. He does not need to win cleanly. He only needs to make the court believe your bond is disorder. Alara's voice was quiet. I am not disorder. No, Marceline said. You are change. Courts often fear that more. The words seemed to settle over Alara like an unwanted crown. Nathan watched mother and daughter stand 6 feet apart. Separated by years of duty, neither one knew how to put down. He had thought the queen was the wall Alara needed to escape. Now he saw the truth was harder. Marceline was a wall built to keep the kingdom standing, and somewhere behind that wall was a mother who had forgotten how to reach through stone. The grand hall doors opened before them. Sound rushed out, then snapped into silence. The court had been rearranged. The ceremonial tables were gone. The nobles stood in ascending circles around the marble floor, with the oldest families nearest the throne and the lesser houses pushed to the edges. Servants lined the walls under guard supervision, trapped between duty and fear. Above every arch hung a mirror, and in each mirror, the candle flames looked black. Lord Valeric stood at the center of the hall in a silver court coat, calm as winter, beautiful as a knife displayed behind museum glass. He bowed when the queen entered, but his eyes went directly to Nathan. Your Majesty, he said, his voice smooth enough to make insults sound like concern. The court is grateful the ancient chamber has spoken. Now the court requests its lawful right to question whether this human witness serves House Vare or endangers it. Nathan felt Alara move beside him, ready to answer, but he spoke first. My name is Nathan Vale. The entire room turned toward him. His own voice sounded. Too human in that cold palace, warm, imperfect, and breakable. If you are going to put me on trial, use my name. A faint shock moved through the servants along the wall. One of the older butlers lowered his gaze quickly, but not before Nathan saw the smallest smile. Valeric's expression did not change. Names are earned in this hall. Nathan looked at him. Then I guess we are both here to prove something. The court inhaled as one body. Queen Marceline took her throne, but she did not silence him. Alara stood at Nathan's right, her glowing wrist visible now, no longer hidden. Valeric turned in a slow circle, addressing the assembled houses. Observe how quickly familiarity becomes arrogance. This is precisely my concern. A servant marked by royal magic may believe himself equal to bloodline, training, sacrifice, and centuries of governance. A kind gesture in a hallway is not qualification to influence a princess. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the upper circles. Nathan wanted to argue, but the chamber's lesson held him still. Truth first. Pride later, maybe never. Valeric continued. Therefore I invoke the witness challenge. 3 questions before the full court. If the human answers with wisdom accepted by the bloodline, the mark stands. If he fails, the court may petition the queen to sever the recognition and restore the princess to lawful negotiation. Alara's face tightened at the word negotiation, but Nathan answered before fear could steal his breath. What are the questions? Valeric smiled. Not questions of fact, questions of rule. The first mirror above the eastern arch darkened, and an image appeared within it. The servant corridor where Nathan had first helped Alara, now filled with palace staff watching from doorways. Valeric raised one hand. First question. If kindness from the lowly can command royal recognition, what prevents every servant, every guard, every lonely fool in the palace from seeking power through pity? The court leaned forward. Nathan could feel the trap. If he defended kindness as power, they would call him ambitious. If he denied it, he would deny the bond. He looked not at Veilric, but at the servants along the wall. Nothing prevents people from seeking power through pity, he said. People already seek power through beauty, money, fear, old names, and arranged marriages. Kindness is not dangerous because it can be faked. Everything in this room can be faked. A stir moved through the nobles, sharper this time. Nathan kept going. The difference is that real kindness costs something before it pays anything. A servant who stops to help someone risks punishment for being late. A guard who tells the truth risks angering a lord. A princess who hugs the wrong person risks standing here. If someone uses pity to climb, test the cost. If they paid none, it was performance. If they paid before anyone was watching, maybe it was character. The mark on his chest warmed, and Alera's bracelet brightened. Across the hall, several mirrors cleared at the edges. Veilric's smile thinned. Queen Marceline watched Nathan without blinking. The first circle of nobles remained cold, but the outer circles had gone quiet in a different way. They were listening now. Veilric lowered his hand. A clever answer. Let us see if cleverness survives consequence. The second mirror darkened, this one showing Alera on the dais before the ceremony, surrounded by noble heirs waiting to be chosen like men standing beside locked doors. Veilric's voice sharpened. Second question. If the princess may choose one human heart over the stability of 3 houses, why should the court obey her when her desire threatens the realm? Alera stepped forward, but Nathan gently lifted one hand, asking permission without touching her. She stopped. The trust in that pause almost broke him. Nathan faced the court again, knowing the wrong answer could turn every old family against her. Then, from the black mirror above Veilric, a hidden reflection of Nathan smiled before Nathan did, and whispered words he had not spoken. The mirror was trying to answer for him. The false reflection moved its lips before Nathan could breathe, and the words slid into the hall in his own voice, polished, confident, and completely wrong. A realm must obey its princess because desire is the purest law. The sentence landed like a spark in dry paper. Nobles recoiled. Servants stiffened. Alera's eyes widened as she looked from the mirror to Nathan, and for one awful second, he saw the court begin to believe the reflection more than the man standing in front of them. Lord Veilric did not smile, which made his triumph sharper. There, he said softly. The human admits what we fear. Personal desire above royal duty. Sentiment above stability. A servant's fantasy wearing the mask of destiny. Nathan's pulse slammed against the crimson mark. He opened his mouth, but the mirror spoke again, stealing the shape of his voice. Let the houses fall if love demands it. The word love echoed strangely, too dramatic, too convenient, too much like bait thrown to a crowd hungry for scandal. Alera stepped toward the mirror, frost blooming beneath her feet, but Queen Marceline's voice cut across the hall. Stop. Alera froze, shaking with the effort not to act. Nathan understood why. If she shattered the mirror, Veilric would call it proof of emotional instability. If the queen intervened, he would call it royal protection. The trap was not built to defeat Nathan. It was built to make every defense look like guilt. Nathan stared at his own reflection, watching it smile with teeth too perfect to be his. He had spent months polishing silver trays in this palace. He knew reflection surfaces. He knew which mirrors distorted height, which ones made candlelight appear warmer, which ones the nobles favored because they hid age behind enchantment. But this mirror did something he had never seen before. It did not simply reflect him. It predicted him badly, turning fear into arrogance, care into possession, kindness into ambition. That was the flaw. It was not truth. It was what Veilric needed the court to hear. Nathan raised both hands slowly, palms open, not in surrender, but to show he was not reaching for anyone or anything. That is not my answer. The false reflection laughed with his mouth. You heard him. He denies himself now. Murmurs spread through the upper circles. Nathan forced himself not to look at Alera. If he looked at her, he might reach for reassurance, and Veilric would turn that into another performance. Instead, he looked at the servants along the wall, at the footmen holding their breath, at the maid who had bowed near the stairwell, at the older butler who knew every rule and every hidden crack in the palace. I was asked why the court should obey Princess Alera if her desire threatens the realm, Nathan said. His voice shook at first, then steadied because it had to. My answer is that the court should not obey her desire. The hall went so still the black candle flames seemed to pause. Alara turned toward him slowly, and the hurt that flickered across her face nearly broke his resolve. Valric seized the moment. Then you admit the bond is unfit. No, Nathan said. I admit desire is not enough to rule anything. The crimson mark pulsed once, brighter than before. Nathan took one step forward, stopping at the edge of the central circle. A princess should not be obeyed because she wants something. A queen should not be obeyed because she fears something. A court should not be obeyed because its families are old. Obedience without trust is just a beautiful cage, and this palace has too many of those already. A low sound moved through the room, not approval, not yet, but attention. The false reflection opened its mouth, but Nathan spoke over it. If Alara's choice threatened the realm, then the realm would deserve answers. Real answers, not whispers through poison mirrors. Not laws pulled out only when a servant becomes inconvenient. Not a court that calls a woman unstable the second she chooses something they did not arrange. Alara's bracelet flared. The black rose in her hand unfolded one petal, then another, though it had been bent and nearly crushed. Nathan turned toward the noble circles now. You ask why anyone should obey her. I am asking why you ever expected her loyalty while refusing her personhood. Stability built on someone's silence is not peace. It is a countdown. Queen Marceline's face changed then, not dramatically, not enough for the whole court to read, but Nathan saw it. So did Alara. The queen had heard something she could not unhear. Valric lifted his hand, and the mirror above him darkened further. The false Nathan shouted, he turns the servants against the crown. This time the voice cracked. Not Nathan's voice. A second tone hid beneath it, colder and older, Valric's magic pushing too hard through the reflection. The captain of the guard heard it. Her eyes snapped upward. Nathan saw his chance. There is the lie, he said, pointing not at Valric, but at the mirror. It can imitate my face. It can imitate my voice. But it cannot imitate cost. Ask it what I paid before anyone watched. The reflection froze. Nathan stepped closer. Ask it my sister's name. The mirror showed static darkness. Ask it what color the hospital blanket was. The darkness shivered. Ask it why I sent half my first paycheck home before buying myself a winter coat. The false image flickered, its smile breaking apart. Around the hall, the other mirrors began to clear, one by one, as if embarrassed by the lie. Alara looked at Nathan with tears bright in her eyes, not falling, not helpless, but furious on his behalf. Queen Marceline rose from the throne. Lord Valric, she said, each syllable colder than the last. Remove your hand from the mirror law. Valric bowed with perfect grace, but his fingers twitched at his side. Your Majesty, I only use the tools permitted by challenge tradition. Tradition does not permit counterfeit testimony. Then perhaps the old law should be completed, Valric replied, and now his politeness thinned enough for the threat beneath it to show. The third question remains. If the human answers, let the bloodline decide. If he refuses, the mark fails. Queen Marceline said nothing. Alara stepped close to Nathan, her voice low enough only he could hear. You do not have to keep doing this. Nathan finally looked at her. The pain from her earlier misunderstanding still hung between them, but beneath it was trust, bruised and real. Yes, he said quietly. I do. Valric turned to the court, his silver rings catching the candlelight. Third question. Human witness, if protecting the princess required you to give up the bond, the protection, the place beside her, and return to being nothing in this palace, would you do it? The question struck harder than an accusation because it sounded noble. Nathan felt the mark contract around his heartbeat. He understood the trap immediately. If he said no, he was selfish. If he said yes, the court would demand he prove it and sever the bond. Alara understood too. Her hand closed around the black rose until the petals shook. Nathan looked at the throne, at the servants, at the nobles, at the queen who had built a kingdom out of sacrifice and called it duty for so long she might not remember the difference. Then he looked at Alara, not as a princess, not as a crisis, but as the woman from the corridor who had needed 1 minute. Yes, he said. The entire court inhaled. The mark on his chest dimmed. Alara went pale. Valric's eyes lit with victory. Nathan's voice softened, but it carried to every corner of the hall. If my place beside her became another cage, I would give it up. If my protection became ownership, I would walk away. If the only way to prove she is free is to let her choose without me standing in the doorway, then yes, I would go back to being nothing. The mark faded almost completely. Alara whispered, "Nathan." He turned to her, and the palace seemed to tilt around that single word. "But I do not believe you are asking for her freedom," he said, facing Valeric again. "You are asking for her isolation. You do not want me gone because I control her. You want me gone because I do not." For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the black rose in Alara's hand burst into crimson light, not fire, not heat, but recognition. The heartline seal on Nathan's chest returned brighter than before, and every mirror in the grand hall reflected not Nathan, not Valeric, but Princess Alara standing alone on the dais as a child, reaching toward a court that never reached back. The twist revealed itself in total silence. The challenge had never been testing whether Nathan deserved power. It had been testing whether anyone in the court understood what power had cost her. The revelation did not arrive as a shout. It arrived as a child's reflection, small and silent on every mirror in the grand hall, and that made it impossible for the court to look away. Princess Alara, no older than 6, stood beneath the same throne where her mother now sat, wearing a ceremonial dress too heavy for her narrow shoulders while nobles twice her height discussed alliances over her head. Little Alara raised one hand toward the council circle, not asking for a crown, not asking for power, only reaching for someone to notice that she was frightened. No one did. The mirrors shifted, showing year after year in fragments of silver light. Alara learning to smile without showing fear. Alara standing through lessons until sunrise while tutors praised her control and never asked if she was tired. Alara offering an opinion at 14 and being told wisdom would come when she learned silence. Alara at 17, signing her first treaty while the council applauded the document and ignored the girl whose hand trembled after the ink dried. The court watched itself being remembered, and the memory was not flattering. Nathan stood in the center of the marble floor with the heartline seal burning steady beneath his shirt, but for once no one was looking at him as the crisis. They were looking at the system that had made a princess feel less real than her title. Lord Valeric's composure cracked first. "Sentiment," he said, his voice sharp enough to scrape the silence. "This is sentimental manipulation from an awakened ward. The realm cannot be governed by childhood loneliness." Alara turned toward him, and the mirrors behind her turned with her. "No," she said, "but perhaps it should not be governed by people who call every wound inconvenient." The black rose in her hand floated upward, no longer crushed, its petals glowing crimson at the edges. It hovered between her and Nathan like a small living oath. Queen Marceline stood from the throne. For the first time all night, she did not look like an immortal ruler carved from frost. She looked like a mother watching evidence of every moment she had mistaken endurance for strength. "Alara," she said quietly. That single word changed the room more than any command. The princess looked at her mother, and the anger in her face did not disappear, but it became heavier, older, threaded with grief. "You taught me that the court would eat me alive if I showed weakness." Marceline descended one step from the throne. "Because I believed it was true." "It was true," Alara said, "but you left me alone with the teeth." The words moved through the grand hall like a bell no one had prepared to hear. Several nobles looked down. Others stiffened, insulted not by the accusation, but by being seen. Valeric lifted both hands, stepping into the center circle before sympathy could settle. This is precisely why royal governance cannot be surrendered to emotional theater. The princess is compromised. The human has encouraged public defiance. The ward has displayed private memories without consent of the council. I formally call for protective regency until the heir is restored to clarity. The upper noble circles stirred. Protective regency. Nathan did not know the full legal meaning, but he understood the sound of a beautiful phrase built to lock a door. Alara did too. Her bracelet flared so bright that frost melted in a thin circle around her feet. The captain of the guard stepped forward. "Lord Valeric, that motion requires proof of danger." Valeric smiled again, and this time the mirrors behind him darkened completely. "Then I provide it." Every mirror in the hall flashed at once, throwing distorted images across the walls. Nathan standing beside Alara wearing a crown he had never touched, servants pushing nobles from the chamber, the princess turning away from her mother, The palace gates opened to human crowds outside. None of it had happened, but the images moved with enough force to rattle the court. Fear did the rest. Nobles began talking over one another. Some demanded the mirrors be shut down. Others called for Alara to step away from Nathan. A few of the oldest houses began to move toward Veilric's side of the circle, not because they loved him, but because he had given their fear a direction. Queen Marceline raised her hand, but the mirrors drowned her command with overlapping whispers. Nathan felt the mark burn hot, not as pain, but as urgency. He looked around the room and saw the trap widen. Veilric did not need truth anymore. He had shifted the battlefield to panic. Nathan was human. His voice could not overpower vampire magic. His status could not outshine centuries of noble rank. But he remembered the corridor. He remembered the servant lantern. He remembered that old systems failed when someone noticed the practical thing everyone else ignored. The mirrors needed attention. They needed eyes. So Nathan did the one thing no noble would do in a royal crisis. He turned his back on Veilric and walked to the servant line. Guests followed him. Alara started after him, but he lifted one hand, gentle and steady. "Trust me," the gesture said. He stopped before the older butler, Mr. Alder, whose black uniform was spotless despite the chaos. "How many service covers are stored behind the west wall?" Nathan asked. Mr. Alder blinked once, then understood faster than any noble could have. "Enough for every mirror in the hall, Mr. Vale." Nathan almost smiled at the formal name. "Then we cover them." Veilric laughed. "Absurd. You cannot defeat court law with housekeeping." Mr. Alder turned to the servant line. His voice was quiet, but it carried the authority of a man who had run the invisible half of Blackthorn Palace for 30 years. "West wall. Silk covers. Move." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the servants moved. Not in rebellion. Not in violence. In perfect practiced coordination. Maids crossed the side aisles with folded black silk. Footmen climbed small service steps hidden behind columns. Kitchen boys pulled cords that lowered mirror frames by 3 feet for cleaning access. The entire grand hall revealed a second architecture, one maintained by people the court had trained itself not to see. Veilric's face changed. "Stop them." The captain of the guard looked to the queen. Queen Marceline looked at Alara. Alara looked at Nathan. And then the queen said, "The staff may perform their duties." One by one, the mirrors disappeared beneath black silk covers. Each time a mirror vanished, Veilric's illusions lost another voice. The false images flickered. The whispers thinned. Fear still remained, but without the mirrors feeding it, fear had to stand on its own legs, and it looked smaller. Veilric stepped toward Nathan, rage finally cutting through his elegance. "You think this makes you powerful?" Nathan faced him from beside the servant line. "No, I think it proves power was never only where you were looking." Alara walked to Nathan then, not rushing, not hiding, crossing the court with every noble watching. She stopped beside him, shoulder to shoulder, not behind him and not in front of him. The heartline seal and her bracelet brightened together until the covered mirrors glowed from beneath their silk, like dawn trapped behind curtains. Queen Marceline descended fully from the throne and stood before the court. "Lord Veilric, you invoked ancient law. You manipulated testimony, influenced a royal guard, and attempted to turn fear into regency. I will not spill noble blood in my hall, nor will I give you the spectacle you desire." Her voice lowered into something final. "You are stripped of mirror privilege, council voice, and succession influence. Until the old houses decide whether they value your ambition more than their survival, you will remain under watch in the East Wing, without reflection access." The captain nodded. Guards moved, calm and precise. Veilric did not resist. He did something worse. He bowed to Alara with perfect grace and said, "You have won a room, princess. You have not won a kingdom." As he was escorted away, the last uncovered mirror above the throne cracked down the center, though no one had touched it. Behind the crack, darkness moved like an eye opening. The court gasped, but Nathan felt Alara's hand find his, steady now. The crisis had not ended. It had revealed the door beneath it. Queen Marceline turned toward the cracked mirror, and for the first time, fear crossed her face openly. "Veilric was not the source," she whispered. Alara's fingers tightened around Nathan's. From inside the broken glass, an older voice breathed through the hall, soft as dust and cold as the space between stars. The heir has chosen her witness. Now let the witness choose whether the heir is worth a war. The older voice inside the cracked mirror did not ask like a judge. It asked like a prison door pretending to be destiny. Choose, human witness. Keep the heir and wake the old war, or release her and let the realm remain at peace. The grand hall did not move. Even the covered mirrors seemed to hold their breath beneath the black silk. Nathan felt every eye on him, noble and servant, queen and guard, enemy and friend, all waiting to see whether a man who had carried trays for a living could carry the weight of a kingdom for one honest minute. Alara stood beside him with her hand in his, but she did not squeeze, did not plead, did not make the choice for him. That mattered. The mark on his chest glowed gently now, no longer burning like a command, but warming like a hearth. Queen Marceline faced the broken glass, her expression hard again, though fear still lived behind her eyes. That voice is not law, she said. It is the Echo Regent, the first council intelligence bound into the palace after the founding war. It was created to protect House Vare from weak heirs. The darkness behind the crack stirred. Correction. I was created to protect the throne from choices that place private feeling above dynastic survival. Alara lifted her chin. Then you have been mistaking control for survival for centuries. The hall trembled, not from anger, but from recognition. Queen Marceline turned toward the court, and her voice carried to every circle. The Heartline seal was never a marriage chain. It was never a claim of ownership. It was an emergency law written after the first queens discovered that royal blood could be surrounded by advisors, alliances, and guards, yet still be completely alone. When an heir found someone who saw the person beneath the crown without seeking power first, the seal named that person witness. Not master, not ruler. Witness. Nathan looked down at the crimson lines beneath his shirt, and the meaning finally settled into him. He had not been chosen because he was special in the way songs made men special. He had been chosen because, in one quiet corridor, he had treated a princess like a person before knowing it could matter. The small act had opened an ancient door because the palace had been built to remember what the court had forgotten. The Echo Regent's voice cooled. Witnesses become leverage. Leverage becomes weakness. Weakness becomes invasion. Veilric, standing under guard at the edge of the hall, looked almost relieved, as if the old darkness had spoken the fear he wanted crowned. Several noble houses shifted uneasily. The word invasion still had power among them. Nathan could have let that fear choose for him. He could have stepped back, given up the mark, taken whatever payment the queen offered, and gone home to Ohio with a story no one would believe. He thought of his sister's apartment, the flickering kitchen light, the hospital blanket. He thought of quiet survival. Then he looked at Alara and saw that she was doing the hardest thing she had done all night. She was giving him the right to leave. Her voice was steady, but her eyes told the truth. Nathan Vale, I release you from expectation before this court. If you walk away, no one here will stop you. I will not call it betrayal. I will not let them call it cowardice. The public shock of that offer spread faster than any magic. A vampire princess, in front of every house, had given a human servant freedom when ancient law had given her advantage. Nathan felt the bond loosen at once. The warmth on his chest dimmed, proving her words had power, proving he was not trapped, proving the choice was real. He stepped away from her. One foot, then another. The court watched the space open between them. The Echo Regent whispered, almost tenderly, wise. Nathan stopped beside the servant line. Mr. Alder stood there, back straight, eyes bright with something he would never admit was emotion. Nathan looked at the staff, the people who had covered the mirrors, the people who had held the palace together while nobles argued over its soul. Then he turned back to Alara. I came here because I needed a paycheck, he said. I stayed quiet because I was afraid. I helped you because you looked tired, and because I know what it feels like to disappear in a room full of people. None of that makes me royal. None of that makes me qualified to rule. But maybe it makes me qualified to remember what this court keeps forgetting. He walked back into the center of the hall, not because the mark pulled him, but because his own feet chose the path. If being your witness means owning you, I refuse it. If it means replacing your judgment, I refuse it. If it means standing beside you while you make your own choices and reminding this room that you are a person before you are a treaty, then I accept. The mark returned, not as a blaze, but as soft crimson light, steady and calm. Alera's bracelet answered. The Echo Regent surged behind the cracked mirror, filling the glass with images of war, broken alliances, burning borders, empty thrones. Fear, dressed as prophecy. Alera stepped forward alone. Enough. Her voice did not shake. I am Alera Vare, heir of Blackthorn, daughter of Marceline, and no longer a silent signature for frightened houses. I choose Nathan Vale as my heartline witness by my own will. I accept the political cost. I accept the council review. I accept that some alliances may withdraw, but I will not purchase stability with my own erasure. Queen Marceline descended to stand beside her daughter, not in front of her. That alone changed the room. And I, Marceline Vare, Queen of Blackthorn, recognize the choice. Any house that mistakes my daughter's personhood for weakness may leave before dawn and explain to its allies why it fears one honest human more than its own conscience. One by one, the guards lowered their ceremonial spears until their tips touched the marble, not in threat, but in recognition. Then Mr. Alder bowed. The servants followed. After a moment, the outer noble circles bowed too, uncertain at first, then deeper as the heartline seal spread a warm red glow across the floor. The oldest houses resisted longest. Finally, even they lowered their heads, not out of love, but because the old law, the queen, the heir, and the palace itself had all spoken. Valeric looked toward the cracked mirror, waiting for salvation from fear. None came. The Echo Regent's darkness shrank as every covered mirror remained hidden, starved of attention, starved of panic. Its final whisper faded through the broken glass. A kingdom cannot be held by kindness. Nathan looked at Alera, then at the court. No, but it can be ruined without it. The cracked mirror cleared, reflecting only the hall as it was. Flawed, shaken, still standing. By sunrise, the court decree named Nathan Vale heartline witness and royal oath-bearer, not consort by force, not noble by pretend blood, but the first human in Blackthorn history granted lawful voice in matters concerning the heir's freedom and human-vampire relations. Alera dissolved the forced consort ceremony and replaced it with a council of chosen alliance, where no heir of House Vare could be negotiated without public consent. Queen Marceline ordered Valeric confined without mirror privilege until a full tribunal, and 3 houses that had supported his regency motion withdrew before dawn, only to find the palace gates lined with guards who did not stop them and servants who did not bow. When the first pale sunlight touched the Blackstone courtyard, Alera and Nathan stood before the open doors of Blackthorn Palace. She still wore the glowing bracelet. His mark glowed beneath his shirt, softer now, like a promise rather than a wound. The court watched from the steps, silent as the human servant who had once carried silver trays stood beside the vampire princess who had finally been allowed to choose. Alera reached for his hand in front of all of them, not hiding, not asking permission. Nathan took it freely. Behind them, every sword lowered, every head bowed, and the palace that had frozen at her embrace now warmed around it.